What if I told you that some of the most important materials in your phone, your laptop, electric cars, and even advanced military equipment all depend on one country? Not oil, not silicon, but rare earth elements. Today, China controls the majority of the global rare earth supply chain, and this didn't happen by accident. It wasn't because China discovered more resources underground than anyone else. It happened because of long-term planning, government support, and a strategic decision the United States chose not to make. Rare earth elements are a group of 17 metals that are essential to modern technology. They're used in smartphones, wind turbines, electric vehicles, medical scanners, satellites, and advanced weapon systems. Despite their name, rare earths aren't actually rare. They're found all over the world, including in the United States. The real challenge isn't finding them, it's processing them. Turning rare earth into usable materials is expensive, technically complex, and environmentally damaging. It involves harsh chemicals, radioactive waste, and large amounts of water. For many countries, especially wealthy ones with strict environmental regulations, this made rare earth production unattractive. But it wasn't always this way in the United States. From the 1960s through the 1980s, the U.S. was the global leader in rare earth production. The world's largest and most productive rare earth mine was located in Mountain Pass, California. American companies supplied most of the world's demand and led the industry in technology and expertise. At the time, rare earths weren't considered strategically important. They were treated like any other industrial input. But as environmental regulations became stricter and production costs increased, Chinese producers entered the market with far cheaper alternatives. Instead of investing in cleaner technology or maintaining domestic production, the U.S. chose a simpler solution. It stopped producing and started importing. That decision changed everything. While the United States stepped back, China moved in. In the 1980s and 1990s, China made a deliberate choice to treat rare earths as a strategic resource. The Chinese government invested heavily in mining, refining, and processing. It supported companies even when they were unprofitable, accepted environmental damage as the cost of development, and focused on building long-term industrial capacity rather than short-term profit. At one point, a Chinese leader famously said, "The Middle East has oil. China has rare earths," and China acted accordingly. China didn't just mine rare earths. It built the entire supply chain from start to finish. Mining was only the first step. China invested in refining, processing, and manufacturing finished components like magnets and batteries. This allowed China to capture more value and develop expertise that other countries slowly lost. This is the part of the story that's often misunderstood. Mining rare earths is not the hard part. Processing them is. Refining rare earths requires specialized knowledge, advanced chemical processes, and years of experience. As American companies shut down and moved on, that expertise disappeared. China, meanwhile, trained engineers, built factories, and refined its techniques over decades. Even today, rare earths mined in countries like the United States, Australia, or nations in Africa are often shipped to China for processing. Once refined, they resold back to the rest of the world in the form of components needed for high-tech manufacturing. China's dominance also gave it enormous control over prices. By producing large volumes at low cost, China could flood the market with cheap rare earths. This drove competitors out of business. Mines in other countries simply couldn't compete with prices backed by government support. Once those competitors shut down, China could raise prices again, reinforcing its dominance. Over time, this wiped out much of the global competition. Skills were lost, infrastructure disappeared, supply chains collapsed. China didn't just become the biggest producer, it became the only producer that mattered. For years, this wasn't seen as a serious problem. Rare earths were important, but they weren't in the spotlight. That changed as technology advanced. Rare earths became essential for renewable energy, electric vehicles, and advanced military systems. Fighter jets, missile guidance systems, radar, and communication equipment all rely on rare earth materials. Governments began to realize something alarming. They weren't just buying consumer electronics from China. They were depending on China for materials critical to national security. At one point, China restricted rare earth exports during a political dispute. This sent shockwaves through global markets and served as a warning. Control over rare earths meant leverage, and China had it. Only then did the United States start taking the issue seriously again. Today, the U.S. is trying to rebuild its rare earth supply chain, but the challenge is enormous. Opening new mines takes years. Building processing facilities takes even longer. Environmental concerns remain, and much of the technical knowledge has to be relearned from scratch. Even if the U.S. dramatically increased investment today, it could take a decade or more to match China's processing capabilities. That's why the U.S. is now working with allies like Australia and Canada, investing in recycling rare earths, and trying to diversify supply chains rather than replace China entirely. But China still holds a massive advantage. This story reveals a larger lesson about global power. It's not just about who has the most resources or the strongest military. It's about long-term planning, industrial strategy, and control over supply chains that most people never think about. China played the long game. United States played the short one. Rare earths are invisible to most people, but they power the modern world. China didn't win the rare earth race by accident. It won by committing early, investing deeply, and staying patient for decades. The real question now isn't how China won. It's whether anyone else can catch up.